The scent of damp earth after a spring rain, mingled with the sharp, almost garlicky perfume of wild ramps pushing through the leaf litter. That is a memory older than my own bones. It's woven into the very fabric of my being, a sensory inheritance from my nukamis, my grandmother, whose Potawatomi name, Gijawasabi, meant sunlight through the leaves. Her hands, gnarled and twisted like the ancient cedar roots that clung to the riverbanks near our community lands in Michigan, possessed a magic that could coax sustenance and story from ingredients most folks would dismiss as mere weeds. We'd be deep in the heart of the forest, the cool morning air alive with the trill of the wood thrush and the chatter of squirrels, her foraging basket, woven from ash splints by her own skilled fingers, already filling with the tender green coils of fiddlehead ferns, the earthy treasure of morel mushrooms, the tart jewels of wild strawberries, things the earth offered freely, generously, if you only knew how to ask, how to see with more than just your eyes. Naya, Indigenous, my daughter, she'd say, her voice as soft and comforting as moss against a sun-warmed stone, her gaze fixed on a patch of unassuming greenery. This forest, this mishkot, prairie, this nibi, water, they are our oldest markets, our most sacred pharmacies. These plants, they are not just food. They hold the stories of our ancestors, the echoes of their songs, the very flavor of our survival through famine and hardship. Cook them with respect. Mino bima dizuen, the good life in your heart. And they will feed more than just the belly. They will nourish the spirit, mend the broken places within. That's where my food, my culinary philosophy, always began, not in a gleaming, impersonal stainless steel kitchen under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights, but out there, under the dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy, with the rich, loamy scent of pine needles and decaying leaves underfoot, the unexpected burst of a wild blueberry, a fleeting moment of pure sunshine on my tongue. My name is Nia, a name that, in retrospect, feels almost painfully prophetic, given the unpredictable, often tempestuous twists and turns my path has taken. It's a name that reminds me that even when you feel unmoored, you are still part of the breath of the world. Years later, after the starchy formality of culinary school, where I dutifully learned the intricate French mother sauces, the bechamel, the velouté, the hollandaise that felt a universe away from Nokomis's intuitive, earthbound cooking, and master the precise, almost surgical art of the brunoise and the tournée. After apprenticeships in high-pressure Michelin-aspiring kitchens in Chicago and Detroit that often felt more like sterile laboratories or military operations than places of genuine nourishment, where creativity was often stifled by rigid hierarchies and the tyranny of the brigade system. After all that, I poured every ounce of that ancestral memory, every lesson in respect and reciprocity Nokomis had instilled in me, into Mishkaman, my restaurant. Mishkaman, the Potawatomi word for raspberry, a small, resilient fruit that thrives even in difficult conditions, a nod to the wild sweetness, the enduring strength, and the vibrant, often underestimated resilience of our Anishinaabe culture. It was a small, unassuming place, tucked away on a side street in a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood of Grand Rapids, a neighborhood where artist lofts and yoga studios were beginning to sprout like invasive species in the cracks of old warehouses. Mishkaman was intended as a defiant splash of color, of warmth, of authentic tradition in a rising sea of exposed brick, reclaimed wood, and ubiquitous Edison bulbs. My vision, my fervent hope, was to serve not just food, however delicious, but our story, our history, our living culture, plate by carefully considered, lovingly prepared plate. We featured dishes that sang of the Great Lakes woodlands and prairies, sumac-dusted pan-seared walleye with a wild rice and toasted hazelnut pilaf drizzled with a tart wajapi berry sauce reduction, slow-roasted bison tenderloin, sourced from a Lakota-owned ranch, served with a creamy sunchoke puree and a rich, earthy morel mushroom ragu. A vibrant Three Sisters succotash, corn, beans, and squash, the sustainers of life, elevated with flakes of smoked whitefish and a hint of chili, and for dessert, a subtly sweet blue corn pudding, enriched with maple syrup tapped from our own tribal lands, adorned with candied pecans and a whisper of fragrant sage. I was obsessive about sourcing. I built relationships with native farmers and harvesters, with tribal fishermen, with foragers who, like Nokomis, knew the secret language of the forest. Every ingredient had a provenance, a story, a connection to the land and our traditions, albeit presented with a contemporary finesse, a lightness of touch I'd honed in those demanding kitchens. The plates themselves were handmade by. For a precious, hopeful while, Mishkaman thrived. Our own community embraced it with a fierce pride, seeing it as a place of celebration, of reclamation. Adventurous foodies tired of the same predictable culinary landscapes sought us out, intrigued by the promise of something genuinely new, yet ancient. We garnered a few glowing local reviews from smaller publications and bloggers who celebrated our unique and vital concept, our heartfelt, deeply personal cooking, and the important cultural conversation we were starting. It felt, for a fleeting, beautiful moment, like I was finally doing what I was meant to do, honoring my ancestors, sharing our vibrant, sophisticated culinary heritage with a wider world, proving that indigenous food was so much more than the stereotypical fry bread and stoicism often portrayed. It was alive, evolving, and utterly delicious. Then the whispers started, insidious and subtle at first, like the first chill of autumn hinting at the harsh winter come. Then they grew louder, more insistent, carried on the fickle winds of online review sites like Yelp and TripAdvisor, and amplified by the pronouncements of serious food critics from the city's glossier, more influential publications. Critics whose palates, I soon discovered, were often as colonized as the lands their ancestors had settled. Simultaneously, the new landlord, a sharp-edged Armani-suited developer named Mr. Henderson, who had recently bought up half the block with promises of urban renewal and luxury condominiums, tripled my rent with a smile that didn't quite reach his cold, calculating eyes. He spoke of market rates and property value enhancement, words that felt like a death sentence to a small, independent restaurant like mine, a restaurant built on passion rather than profit margins. And the reviews, oh, the reviews, they became the stones that, one by one, chipped away at Mushkaman's foundation, at my own spirit. One particularly influential critic, a man named Alistair Finch, whose pronouncements could make or break a restaurant in the city and whose palate seemed calibrated exclusively to the rarefied heights of continental cuisine and the theatrical flourishes of molecular gastronomy, lamented the overall rustic, almost primitive quality of my plating. He found the earthy tones of my hand-thrown ceramic bowls and the natural arrangements of ingredients lacking in visual sophistication, as if the inherent beauty of a perfectly roasted quail nestled on a bed of wild greens, was somehow inferior to a microscopic portion of deconstructed something or other artfully smeared across a stark white, oversized square plate. He found the complex, layered flavors of my dishes, born from generations of understanding plant synergies, unfamiliar and ultimately challenging to the refined diner, which I could only translate as not French enough for his delicate sensibilities. He suggested my food was interesting as a cultural artifact, perhaps, but not quite ready for the serious culinary stage. Another, a lifestyle blogger turned food writer named Tiffany LaRoche, known for her fawning praise of fleeting culinary trends and her obsession with Instagrammability, dismissed my wild game dishes, the bison, the venison, the elk I sourced with such care, as unnecessarily heavy and lacking the expected refinement of modern protein preparations. She suggested, with an air of patronizing authority, that I should consider incorporating more globally recognized luxury ingredients, perhaps some shaved black truffles, a dollop of imported caviar, or a sliver of foie gras, to elevate what she termed my otherwise simple, earthbound fare. Simple? The intricate balance of flavors in my Nokomis's venison stew, slow-simmered for 8 hours with 16 different wild herbs, roots, and berries, a recipe whispered down through generations, was anything but simple. It was a symphony of the forest in a bowl, a testament to a profound and enduring culinary intelligence. Her suggestion felt like asking someone to bedazzle a sacred medicine bundle. But the most galling, the review that truly twisted the knife, came from a popular local food blogger, a man who went by the moniker the Gastronomic Nomad, and who had built a considerable online following with his snarky, often dismissive takes. Underneath a beautifully lit, admittedly flattering photograph of my sweetgrass smoked lake trout served with a delicate wild leek emulsion, he wrote, "While the chef's earnest effort to revive, native traditions is quaint, primitive, unfamiliar, heavy, not refined, lacking sophistication, best left to powwows." The words were not just critiques of my food. They were judgments, dismissals of my culture, my heritage, my very identity. They were the same tired, colonial tropes that had been used for centuries to marginalize and denigrate Indigenous peoples and our ways of life. They weren't just reviewing my carefully crafted dishes. They were reviewing us as a people and finding us wanting, as they always had. This was the insidious, creeping nature of gentrification. It wasn't just about rising rents and displacement of bodies. It was about the erasure of culture, of history, of anything that didn't fit the new, sanitized, homogenized, and ultimately more profitable aesthetic. My little Mishkomin, with its authentic scent of wood smoke and wild herbs, its celebration of a pre-colonial palate, was an anomaly, an inconvenience, a stubborn weed in their carefully manicured urban garden. The lethal combination of an exorbitant, unsustainable rent increase and the slow, agonizing bleed of customers deterred by those biased, culturally illiterate, and widely circulated reviews was a death knell. I fought with every fiber of my being. I adapted the menu slightly, tried to introduce a few more approachable dishes without sacrificing my core principles. I ran promotions, offered tasting menus, pleaded with the landlord for a more reasonable lease. But it was like trying to hold back a tsunami with cupped hands. The day I had to lock the doors of Mishkomin for the very last time, a profound, hollow ache settled in my chest. A piece of my spirit withering and dying alongside the wilting herbs in the window boxes. The silence in that empty dining room, a space that had once pulsed with laughter, conversation, and the joyful clatter of happy diners connecting over shared food, was a deafening roar of failure, of loss. I felt like I'd let Nokomis down, let my ancestors down, let my community down. The wind, my namesake, felt like it had been knocked out of me. The months that followed were a gray, featureless blur of mounting debt, gnawing despair, and the acrid, persistent taste of injustice. I sold my aging but beloved pickup truck, then my few pieces of good kitchen equipment. I moved out of my small apartment above Mishkomin and into a tiny, cramped room, and the irony wasn't just bitter. It was a daily torment. Here I was, Chef Nia, trained in the subtleties of classical French haute cuisine and the profound, nuanced depths of indigenous North American foodways, now reheating frozen mozzarella sticks and ensuring each deluxe bacon cheeseburger had exactly 2 pickle slices, no more, no less, arranged in a perfectly symmetrical, corporate-approved pattern. Each perfectly identical, flavorless tomato slice I was forced to place on a bun felt like a tiny personal betrayal of everything I believed in, everything Nokomis had taught me. My spirit felt like it was slowly being deep-fried in stale grease. But the fire that Nokomis, Giza-wasabi, had kindled in me, the embers of resilience and creativity that she had so carefully tended, the spark that was fanned by the winds of my name, hadn't been entirely extinguished. It smoldered, deep within, starved of oxygen, but stubbornly refusing to die, waiting, just waiting, for a breath of fresh air, a chance to reignite. That breath of air, that unexpected spark, came, as inspiration often does, from a place of neglect and near ruin. A beat-up, decommissioned, rust-streaked taco truck I saw slowly surrendering to the Michigan elements in my friend Joe Whitedeer's overgrown backyard. Joe was a fellow Potawatomi, a jack-of-all-trades with a heart as big as Lake Michigan. "What in the world are you ever going to do with that old beast, Joe?" I'd asked him one afternoon, sharing a beer on his porch after a particularly soul-crushing shift at the burger barn. He shrugged, taking a long swig. "Sentimental value, mostly. Belonged to my Uncle Jimmy back in the day. He used to sell the best res dogs and chili out of it at the powwows. Engine's shot to hell now, though. Brakes are gone. Probably just let it rust in peace." An idea, audacious, improbable, and utterly terrifying, sparked in the depleted landscape of my mind. A food truck. It was the absolute antithesis of Mishkomin's sit-down, tablecloth and real silverware elegance, but it was mobile. It would be mine, beholden to no landlord, no biased critic with an expense account. It was a way to bypass the gatekeepers, the culinary tastemakers, the Henderson-esque developers. It was a way to take my food, our food, directly to the people, on my own terms, with no compromises. It was a chance to cook with freedom again. It took nearly a year of relentless scrimping and saving every spare dollar from my Burger Barn wages, of calling in every single favor I was owed from my years in the culinary world, of maxing out a small, high-interest credit card, and of learning the basics of diesel mechanics, plumbing, and electrical wiring from grainy YouTube videos late into the night. Spirit Plate, my food truck, was finally born. Phoenix-like from the ashes of Mishgaman and the rust of Uncle Jimmy's old taco wagon. The name was a solemn promise. Every dish served from its window would be an offering, a connection to something deeper, to the spirit of the ingredients, the spirit of our ancestors, the spirit of resilience. The truck itself became a rolling work of art, a vibrant beacon against the often monotonous urban gray. I commissioned a talented young Anishinaabe artist from our community, Miigwan, to paint it. She covered it in breathtaking designs, inspired by traditional woodland floral beadwork patterns and the sacred symbolism of the medicine wheel. A riot of deep reds, sky blues, forest greens, and sun yellows. It was impossible to miss. The menu for Spirit Plate was necessarily small, focused, and adaptable, dictated by what I could source seasonally and affordably, and what could be efficiently prepared in a cramped, mobile kitchen. But every single item was infused with the same passion, the same integrity, the same unwavering commitment to authenticity that had defined Mishgaman. Perhaps even more so now, as my cooking was sharpened by hardship, fueled by a renewed sense of defiance, and stripped bare of any pretense. There were the now legendary bison chili cheese fries, crispy, hand-cut sweet potato fries, smothered in a rich, smoky bison and wild bean chili, topped with aged cheddar, a sprinkle of fresh cilantro, and a generous dollop of wild ramp aioli. There were sumac-dusted, cornmeal-crusted walleye tacos on freshly pressed blue corn tortillas, with a fire-roasted corn and black bean salsa, a tangy tomatillo verde, and a cooling avocado crema. There were hearty wild rice and cranberry bowls, studded with toasted pumpkin seeds, drizzled with a maple balsamic vinaigrette, and topped with slices of grilled, sage-rubbed venison sausage. And, of course, there was Nokomis's wojapi, that warm, sweet, slightly tart mixed berry sauce, simmered slow and low, served with individual portions of crispy, golden, pillowy fry bread, because some traditions are too sacred, too deeply comforting, too utterly delicious to ever abandon or apologize for. The first few months of operating Spirit Plate were a brutal, relentless grind. 12, 14, sometimes 16-hour days. The cramped conditions in the truck, especially during a summer heat wave, were almost unbearable. Navigating the labyrinthine bureaucracy of city permits, health inspections, and designated parking regulations for food trucks was a nightmare in itself. Some days, after all the expenses, I barely broke even. The old doubts, the whispering ghosts of Mishgaman's failure, often returned, but then, slowly, painstakingly, things started to change. A curious office worker would try a taco on her lunch break. Her eyes would widen in surprise and delight, and she'd come back the next day, dragging along her colleagues. I parked near community centers in underserved neighborhoods, at local farmers markets where I could connect directly with growers, at Indigenous art fairs, and yes, at powwows, where the scent of my cooking mingled with the aroma of fry bread from other vendors, a comforting, familiar olfactory tapestry. The Native community, my community, showed up in force. Their unwavering support, a warm, sustaining blanket against the chill of uncertainty. Word began to spread, organically, through hushed, appreciative murmurs between bites, then through enthusiastic, beautifully filtered Instagram posts and glowing Facebook recommendations. The true turning point, the moment the wind, my namesake, truly, unequivocally shifted in my favor, came on a blustery, overcast Tuesday afternoon in late October. I was parked in a somewhat overlooked, slightly gritty industrial area on the west side, a place that, nevertheless, had a surprising amount of lunchtime foot traffic from nearby artist lofts, small tech startups, and a community college extension campus. A woman approached the truck, her expression thoughtful, keenly observant. She wasn't one of my regulars. I would have remembered her. She was dressed simply, but with an understated elegance, and she carried an air of quiet authority. She ordered one of everything on the menu, a sampler platter, she called it with a small smile, paid with a credit card, and then sat on a nearby concrete ledge, meticulously tasting each dish, taking detailed notes on her phone, occasionally closing her eyes as if to fully absorb the flavors. I didn't think much of it at the time, just another curious, perhaps discerning customer. I was too busy slinging tacos and trying to keep the line moving. 3 days later, on a Friday morning, my cheap pay-as-you-go phone, which usually only buzzed with messages from suppliers or reminders from my cousin Kai to pick up more propane, exploded. It didn't just ring. It vibrated, pinged, and flashed with a relentless barrage of calls, texts, and social media notifications, almost jumping off the tiny prep counter in the truck. The woman, it turned out, was Anya Sharma, a nationally renowned Pulitzer-adjacent food blogger and journalist. She was known for her adventurous palate, her intelligent, insightful prose, her fierce independence from corporate culinary influence. It wasn't just a review, it was a goddamn love letter. It was a paean. She didn't just describe the food, she understood it on the level that no other critic ever had. She wrote about the profound ancestral echoes in my bison chili, the captured essence of a sun-drenched Michigan summer in the Wojapi, the perfect, smoky, delicate char on the walleye that spoke of clear lakes and crackling fires. She lauded the unapologetic, joyful authenticity and the brilliant, subtle, yet deeply intelligent innovation that wove like a bright thread through every single dish. She understood the connection to the land, the stories embedded in the ingredients, the resilience in the face of historical trauma. And then, she did something I never ever expected, something that made tears spring to my eyes as I read her words on my flickering phone screen, huddled in the pre-dawn chill of the truck. She had, through some impressive journalistic digging, unearthed some of those old, biased, dismissive reviews of Mishkamin. She quoted their most ignorant, condescending words, Finch's primitive quality, LaRoche's lacking refinement, the gastronomic nomads best left to powwows. And then, with the precision of a surgeon and the passion of a poet, she systematically, eloquently, and utterly demolished them, contrasting their small-minded, culturally blind critiques with the vibrant, complex, undeniably sophisticated reality of the food she had just experienced from Spirit Plate. She called out their culinary colonialism, their abject failure of imagination, their lazy reliance on Eurocentric standards of taste. She didn't just praise my food, she defended its honor, its legitimacy, its inherent worth. The post went viral within hours. Not just food world viral, but internet viral. It was shared by celebrity chefs I'd long admired from afar, by Indigenous actors and musicians, by social justice activists, by major news aggregators, by anyone and everyone who loved a good underdog story, by anyone who had ever felt dismissed, misunderstood, or marginalized. The hashtag Spirit Plate Revenge started trending, much to my wry, slightly embarrassed amusement. My little food truck was suddenly the hottest culinary ticket in the state, maybe even the region. The lines for Spirit Plate, which had already been growing, now began forming before I even dreamed of opening, snaking down the block and around the corner, a diverse, eager, patient tapestry of humanity, all waiting for a taste of what Anya Sharma had so lyrically described. My little two-person operation, I'd long since hired my young, hard-working cousin Kai to help me manage the chaos, was completely, gloriously overwhelmed, in the best possible way. We sold out of everything, every single day, often within 2 or 3 hours. Local news crews showed up, then regional ones, then a producer from a national morning show. Magazine editors, the kind whose publications had never even acknowledged Mushkamin's existence, were suddenly calling, emailing, wanting exclusive features, recipes, my inspiring immigrant story. I had to gently correct more than one of them that my people were, in fact, not immigrants to this land. The very same publications whose critics had once sneered at Mushkamin's rustic fare now wanted to know the secret to my overnight success. The irony was so thick you could have spread it on fry bread. The revenge I experienced wasn't something I had actively sought, not in a malicious, vindictive way. I didn't need to gloat or say, "I told you so." The overwhelming, joyous success of Spirit Plate, the incredible outpouring of love and genuine appreciation for my food, for our food, from so many different people, was a far more profound and satisfying vindication. It was the critics, the gatekeepers, who ended up looking foolish, their past pronouncements exposed for the biased, culturally illiterate, and ultimately irrelevant nonsense they truly were. One of them, Alistair Finch, the man who'd called my Mishkaman plating primitive, actually had the monumental audacity to show up at the Spirit Plate window one incredibly busy afternoon, a small, expensive notebook and a silver pen clutched in his hand, presumably with the intention of writing a new, reconsidered review to jump on the bandwagon he had so spectacularly missed. I recognized him instantly, despite the passing years. His face was a little puffier, his suit a little shinier, but the same air of smug condescension clung to him like cheap cologne. He approached the window, a forced, ingratiating, almost reptilian smile plastered on his face. "Chef Nia, isn't it?" he began, his voice oozing, a false bonhomie. "Quite the phenomenon you have cultivated here, a remarkable reinvention." I just looked at him, my expression calm, my hands busy assembling a walleye taco. I didn't offer a flicker of recognition, no animosity, but no welcome either, just a cool, professional neutrality. "The menu's on the board to your left," I said, my voice even, then turned to the next eager customer in the long, patient line. "Next?" Finch stood there for a long, awkward moment, his ingratiating smile faltering, then completely collapsing as the reality of his dismissal, his utter irrelevance to me and my current success, seemed to dawn on him. He flushed a dull red, mumbled something incoherent, and then slunk away, disappearing into the bustling crowd. That, perhaps, was the sweetest, most satisfying revenge of all, his complete and utter insignificance in the face of our triumph. The offers, as Anya Sharma had predicted, started pouring in. Serious investment for a new brick-and-mortar restaurant, on my terms this time, with partners who genuinely understood, respected, and celebrated my vision, not just its profit potential. Lucrative cookbook deals, proposals for television cooking shows, invitations to prestigious food festivals around the world. The culinary world, which had once largely dismissed or exoticized Indigenous cuisine as a quaint historical novelty or a challenging niche, was suddenly, belatedly clamoring for it. Or at least for my interpretation of it. We eventually did open a new restaurant, Mishkomin Anu, in a beautiful light-filled space in a revitalized downtown district, a space with an open kitchen where diners could see the care and artistry that went into every dish, and a large, thriving community garden out back, where we grew many of our own specialty herbs, heirloom vegetables, and traditional medicines tended by youth from our community. It was everything the first Mishkomin was meant to be, and so much more. Built not just on my dreams and hard work, but on the undeniable, globally recognized proof that our food, our culture, has a powerful, resonant, and deeply relevant place in the contemporary world. Spirit Plate, my beloved, battle-hardened food truck, still roams the streets, a rolling ambassador of Indigenous flavor and resilience, a constant reminder of where we came from, of the hard-won lessons, of the enduring truth that the best food always, always comes from the heart, from the earth, from the spirit. The journey was a long, often brutal one, paved with systemic injustice, casual cruelty, and moments of profound, soul-crushing despair. But Nokomis Gizawa Sabi was right. The earth, our traditions, our ancestral knowledge, they hold a deep, unshakable power. The revenge I found wasn't about shaming my old critics into silence, though there was a certain quiet, karmic satisfaction in that. It was about reclaiming our narrative, about taking back our voice, about demonstrating to the world, on our own terms, that our flavors are not unfamiliar challenges or primitive offerings, but are, in fact, part of a rich, diverse, ancient, and deeply sophisticated culinary heritage that deserves not just to be acknowledged, but to be celebrated, to be savored, to be shouted from the rooftops. It was about proving that a seed, however small, however much the stony, unforgiving ground of bias, gentrification, and colonial arrogance tries to crush it, can, with enough spirit, enough resilience, and the right winds of change, find a way to not only survive but to bloom with an astonishing, undeniable, and world-changing beauty. And its fruits, when shared with an open, honest heart, can indeed feed the soul, and perhaps even help to heal a fractured world.